Welcome to Hip Hop Now Podcast. If you're from the future, you know what to do. Get your ass out of here. Don't disrespect the legend. Hip Hop is here to stay. Let's get right into the business.
What up, y'all? Welcome to another episode of Hip Hop Now Podcast, a podcast specifically designed to keep you caught up on all things hip hop, music, and culture. First and foremost, big shout out to the listeners, to the supporters, but more importantly, the producers over at patreon.com/hiphopnow. And if you would learn or like to learn, I mean, you can learn. It's all learning. How to become a Patreon supporter, a producer of this podcast. Visit that link because it's in the description of this episode. We're back. It's another week of Hip Hop Now Podcast. Happy New Year to you. If I haven't said it already, but I have, but whatever. And 2023 is just going to start right off with the craziness, right? Like, you didn't take a vacation. People didn't relax. We just going to jump right into the nonsense. For 50 years of hip hop. Let's get into it. Keith Murray. First of all, shout out to the Art of Dialogue. If you, like myself, are a person who doesn't watch that other guy, Splad TV, Plaid TV, whatever you want to call it, where, don't get me wrong, it's great guests, but we know the reasons why we don't really like to watch him. The Art of Dialogue is pretty great. The format is, and honestly, the design is very similar to that other dude, which makes me wonder. I hope what I'm thinking is not what it is, but I'm not going to say what it is, but you know what I'm talking about. But nevertheless, it's a perfect substitute for those people who feel like they don't want to support Vlad TV reviews. You should check out the Art of Dialogue on YouTube. I've been going down a rabbit hole of content with them. It's been great content, but now it's probably viral content on another level. So Keith Murray appeared on that channel doing an interview. You know how nowadays, they release the short snippets from a full interview, and then a little bit later you get however long it was, right? 2 hours or whatever, but you get bites on YouTube now, right? From that same interview. So like 15-minute, 10-minute bites from that interview or samples from that interview. And, I'm like, oh, it's Keith Murray. And given the track record of what I had already watched on the Art of Dialogue, I'm like, I'm locked in, honestly, with certain guests. I just watched RBX interviews, and just to hear that man talk about Death Row from his perspective, it's enlightening for somebody who was around back then where we didn't have the internet. We didn't have these interviews that told all these stories. So it's just been great to learn that. So I'm thinking like, oh, Keith Murray. Keith Murray got a lot of stories. First thing I noticed, I'm like, man, Keith Murray looks like an addict. And I'm not just saying that like, oh, but nah, he had on the such and such shades or glasses. I don't care about that. I really don't. I'm talking about, I know an addict when I see one, right? And that doesn't mean crackhead, but that means he on something, right? On something. Not something, but something. Now, I'm not trying to shame him for it, but that already set the tone for my expectations. So recently, if you wonder what I'm getting at, Keith Murray appeared on this podcast, and two specific sections of his interviews were shared and went viral one by one, maybe strategically. One, him talking about getting head from Foxy Brown back in the days while she was with Corrupt. If you don't know, back in the days, Foxy Brown and Corrupt were an item. Keith Murray is now saying she gave him fellatio while she was married. Then, I think they were married, but whatever. while she was with Corrupt. This is what Keith Murray's saying. Then he said something similar about Shauna, right? If you don't know Shauna Ludacris, you know what I'm talking about. That connection. And he said something similar about her, about basically sexual activities he had with her back in the days. Now, here's the first thing you don't do. You don't blame the outlet, right? If you're conducting the interview with this guy and he feels the need to overshare, you're going to keep the cameras rolling, right? And then you're going to wonder to yourself, probably after the interview, is he cool with us putting this out? Because he said it. He may feel like I probably shouldn't have said that. Don't put it out. I don't know the situation, but yet and still it came out. Let's just say this. Keith Murray talking about these women in hip hop in this way is really whack. You know what I mean? Like, it's just whack. Not because I wish she was me, right? No, I don't care. But because, for one, it's old news, should be old news to him. It's definitely old news to the ladies, if any of it even happened. What is the significance of bringing this up now? I just don't know. Like, what does it do? Now, I can tell you what it does, right? Again, art of dialogue, not their problem, right? He said what he said. They put out content. There's been other content that people might have taken offense to that they put out. Where were you when they put out the other stuff, right? No harm, no foul, though. But with Keith Murray, though, I mean, when you look at the status of Keith Murray, you wonder. You know he's not a Jay-Z or Nas and there's investments and stuff. Doesn't mean he doesn't have investments. You don't know what he's doing it for, right? There's no music out. So if he's not a businessman on the low that's making money off of that, I mean, he can't be getting that much money from royalties, right? And I'm not saying a little bit. He could be getting more than me, whatever it may be. But what is the reason to do this now instead of at any point in his career, right? But to cap, but to clout chase. And that's what I really think it's about, right? Him being a guy who says so much in an interview that's so juicy and people want to retweet and be up in arms and talk about it and blah, 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 that these other platforms who will probably pay him will want to have him on their platform, hoping to get something similar or to continue his story from Art of Dialogue's platform. So it's one of those things where, again, me enjoying the fact that, we are now in a space, 50 years of hip hop, with stuff like YouTube and the internet and social media, where this stuff can be shared and we have access to these artists in ways we didn't before, right? Previously, it was like you wouldn't have saw an interview like this on MTV or BT or TRL. You would have never saw this on 106 & Park. Not this kind of interview. You just wouldn't have, right? But now you can, and there's really no rules. So it's like the gift and the curse, right? Because you get some great interviews where you learn all this stuff about some of your favorite artists from back in the days, and then you get stuff like this. Now, some of you might be wondering, right? Well, what did Foxy have to say? What did Shauna have to say? I think they said the best thing they could have said. And I'm not quoting them right now, but they basically clowned him, right? They basically treated him like somebody that was all cap and clout chasing in whatever way you want to put it. They basically clowned him. And that's probably what should have happened. And that was the best way to handle it, because honestly, it was just stupid. And it takes away from, certain people liking Keith Murray, right? From back in the days or whatever, because you may not know that man personally, but you do remember his music. You might like his music. So you might have somebody who loved his music or a song back in the days, a woman, right? And or a man and they hear stuff like this, and now they don't even like the things they call classic anymore. Like when rappers do this, they don't realize chasing clout. Sometimes you can devalue your brand. I'm pretty sure Keith Murray going on this platform and saying what he said and trying to get exposure at this point in time, the plan wasn't to devalue his brand. It couldn't have been. But again, we live in a space and time where sometimes controversy doesn't devalue your brand. It increases the need for other YouTubers to have you on. And again, some of them pay. So at the same time, I thought it was whack, but there you go. Quentin Miller. Now, if you remember that name or you don't, that is the dude that's essentially synonymous with the Meek Mill and Drake battle. Not because of the battle itself, but because of the notion that Drake had a ghostwriter on some rap stuff, right? Now, I necessarily wasn't surprised, and I really don't think Quentin Miller was the only one. And back then, I didn't really think it was a big deal, because when you hear the song, I mean, it didn't really take much to write that. But Quentin Miller's name resurfaced in recent weeks when King's Disease 3 came out, and supposedly Quentin Miller was involved with the project. People started saying, oh, Quentin Miller wrote some of Nas's rhymes or songs and blah, blah, blah. That we don't know. It was said that that's not what happened. But at the same time, Quentin Miller started catching heat because everybody knows his pen, because they've heard his music and they've heard what he's written. And they're like, there's no way you wrote that for Nas, right? Even if he did, people are just not going to believe it. Well, he's been in the news for not only that, but talking about like how like his ghostwriting stuff, I guess particularly with Drake, because he didn't have his business right. He didn't really get paid in the way he should have. And he was even saying, you know, that he was nice in so many words as far as his pen. I heard this man's music back when he supposedly not supposedly, but when he was ghostwriting for Drake. Homie's not that good. Now let's talk about ghostwriting and people like that. Does that mean Quentin Miller is not in the studio with these legendary artists helping to pen hits? No, that does not mean that. People are just going to have to understand, and I'm looking at you, 50 years of hip hop, won't let go of the rules, cats. This type of thing has been going on for much longer than we knew as it relates to hip hop, right? We knew Michael Jackson didn't write all his songs. If I'm talking about, like, if any, we knew that Stevie Wonder wrote some stuff, and you know, Rod Temperton, I believe that's how you pronounce his last name, wrote a lot of stuff. We knew this, right? But those rules don't apply to, like, you know, singing, R&B and pop and all that. But hip hop had rules of, yo, you're a rapper, you write your own rhymes. That's what it is. And that was true for a very long time, because in a lot of ways, not only was it said on the streets, but that's what rappers said in their rhymes. But the writing process, the production process, studio sessions, it wasn't, for every single case, for every legend, it wasn't always, you know, Nas is in there, only Nas and Primo are in there for this production. It just wasn't. It wasn't only Primo, you know, doing this with the beat. Now, don't get me wrong. Some people, yes, they still are handling the majority of the production and the majority of the writing. But it's just well known that when you have a music career, especially when you have longevity, and I'm not even talking about 10 or 12 albums like people like Nas and Too Short. I'm talking about once you hitting like 3, right? Sometimes 2 albums. There are people there to help you get the best out of your idea, out of your song, out of your creation. And it doesn't matter if it's a tweak, if it's a line, if it's a word, if it's a way you should express the word, it's never just the artist doing that. Because let me just tell you like this, some rappers don't write their rhymes down, right? Some rappers write all their rhymes down. Some rappers write their rhymes digitally, right? On their phone and stuff like that. Some rappers can see the vision of their song from concept to what they write, editing, recording, tweaking, and everything. They can do all those different parts. But some dudes really just have an idea. And they can get most of the vision out, but not all of it. Sometimes they can get the verses out, but they're bankrupt when it comes to a hook. So that's where people like Quentin Miller come into place, because they can sit back and analyze what this record is and then say it needs this, right? That's just what it is. Now, we know there are ghostwriters who write everything. Whoever raps those things, they're just an entertainer. So I'm looking at you, Puff, or Brother Love, or whatever your name is. But nevertheless, what can you do about it? It's the game. Now, when Quentin Miller talks about himself as if he's, something greater than he is, that's kind of when the hip hop community have a problem with him even talking, right? Because ghostwriters are to be in the studio and not really seen and heard. And sometimes, but not all the time, and this is just not hip hop, they yearn to be in front of the camera instead of behind the camera, in front of the mic instead of behind the mic. And I think Quentin Miller is one of those guys, right? Now you know me. Now more people know me. Maybe I can stop working with others and work for myself. The problem with that is again, I heard his music when he was ghostwriting for Drake, and I was like, that's why he's a ghostwriter, because he's not that great as an artist, right? There's different levels to an artist, right? You can't just have the ability to write great songs. You have to be able to perform them well. And it's not just, well, of course I could perform it, I wrote it. That's not the case. Sometimes you can write some really powerful stuff down as a song, and it sounds terrible when you say it. So that's all I'm saying. And this is no disrespect to Quentin Miller, but when it comes to ghostwriting and how he feels and, all the stuff that's going on, this conversation around him and his contributions and what he said, Nas said about him, it's just him wanting to be out there as an artist himself. That's all it is. And lastly, it's finally here. Well, not exactly, but it's on the way. De La Soul's music catalog will be coming to streaming platforms in March. That's what I heard. That's what was announced in some ways. We'll see if it happens. Now, I know some may be thinking to themselves, so, like, everybody's already on streaming services. What makes De La Soul so different? Well, what makes them so different is the fact that they went through a battle with Tommy Boy Records where there was a very good chance. And if you go back and listen to my podcast from years ago at this point, it was a very long time and it looked like it would never happen. Now, some may say to themselves as a music fan, well, if you're a fan of De La Soul, why don't you already have it, right? If you have the CD, if you have the vinyl, why don't you rip it and put it on, your iTunes or whatever, and boom, you got it streaming on your phone everywhere. Well, some have done that, right? And some have CDs and don't know how to do all that stuff. Some people don't want to buy it digitally if they have it sitting somewhere where they can just pop it in their car or whatever. But we live in a time of music where streaming services are big business, extremely important to those that consume music, whether you're listening to albums or playlists or whatever it may be. And it's really the way people kind of discover your music nowadays, which is crazy because the artists don't see a lot of money off of those streams. But it is the way, right? It is the way. It's easier for someone to write a story about De La Soul during the 50 years of hip hop and say to themselves, De La Soul is a great group, blah, blah, blah. So if you never heard of them, should look them up. Well, we live in an age where to some people, that doesn't only mean Google them, but you want to press play on something. And there are other ways to hear, De La Soul's music, without the official platforms. But there's some people who don't use technology like that. They have their phone and everything is there. You tell them, De La Soul was it. You need to check out Stakes is High. They're going to their Apple Music. They're going to their Spotify. They're going to their Tidal. They don't see that album. They move on. They forget, it's not available. It's tough for a group like De La Soul to remain present in a time where, people move on to other things. There's so much competition for attention, for the attention of users and music listeners. And everything is quick. Everything is a playlist. So their catalog finally come into streaming services. In a lot of ways, just makes De La Soul more accessible to their longtime fans, to fans that kind of fell off the wagon because they don't really listen to CDs no more, but they wish they could listen to De La Soul. People who didn't digitize their music don't have it anymore, but they do have Spotify, and they wish they could just go listen to everything. They wish they could make a playlist on Spotify to work out that's all De La Soul, but they can't until March of 2023. So it's dope. I hope, even though I heard they're good to go, but I hope De La Soul has worked out a situation where it's beneficial for them. I hope when that music hits, as many hip hop fans, De La Soul fans, I don't care if you got the album sitting right there, stream it as much as you can. Go buy the vinyl and CDs if they make it available directly from the artist or whatever way they're going to do it, because De La Soul is worth it. And that's what's up. That's going to do it for me for this episode. You can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at Vegas World INC. And please know that this podcast, Hip Hop Now Podcast, is available wherever you get your podcasts. The link is in the description of this episode. Don't forget to follow me on YouTube. My channel is called Hip Hop Now Podcast, or that's what you can search. Subscribe to that channel. It's hip hop content. Every now and again, it's video games. Don't be afraid. Hip hop content is still going to be coming hot and heavy on this. I guess I got to say pause now because I said that, but you get what I'm saying, man. I'm talking about we're going to put out a lot of content, okay? But then again, hit the subscribe button, hit that like button, comment on some of these stories, and most importantly, share it with people you know enjoy this kind of content. Until next time, y'all, I am not a critic, I'm a fan. Peace.